Okay, so welcome to the first group coaching session for Day Optimizer. Today, we're going to talk about time blocking without a schedule. And so what is a time block? A time block is time that is set aside to work on a task or a group of tasks that is usually scheduled in your calendar. So if you've read about time blocking elsewhere, you've usually seen that, hey, you should schedule a block of time from 2 to 4 or 2 to 3:30 or something like that to work on a specific task. Sometimes people will tell you to work on a group of tasks, like, hey, I want to work on marketing. Excuse me. Today, we're going to talk about time blocks that are not scheduled in your calendar. So the same thing applies. There's still a defined set of time. It's just we're not actually going to specify exactly when they start in our day. And this will give us more flexibility if our day tends to get away from us, or we don't really need to, we have reasons why we don't want to keep a fixed schedule. So time blocks give us a defined time period, right? I'm saying I'm going to work on something for an hour and a half. That itself creates a container for focus. And when you set aside a specific amount of time and say, I'm going to work on something for an hour and a half, 90 minutes or so, that creates in our brains an artificial scarcity. And that scarcity then helps us focus more. Because when things are scarce, when resources are scarce, our brains tend to shift into a focus mode. Like if there's not enough food, you're going to immediately start being able to pay attention to where the food is. When things are abundant, we tend to not focus on them as much. So by creating this artificial time scarcity, we actually create more focus. So that's one of the things that time block does, is by saying, I'm only going to work on this for an hour and a half, we can get more focus. And then finally, it acts as an artificial time constraint, because we can say, hey, I have the blog article to write, I'm only going to spend 60 minutes on it. And then that helps us manage our competing priorities, because we can say, hey, this is important enough to work on, but it's not so important that it should take me 4 hours today. It's only going to have a certain amount of time today. So how do we define what to work on? We have 4 different ways that we can define a time block. It can be a task block, where we're working on creating a specific task, like creating this time blocking presentation. It can be a category block. So creating a category of tasks like marketing, admin, email, etc. It can be a context block, and this you'll often see people who schedule deep work in their calendar, or office work. So that can be based on your energy or your location, where you want to work on that thing, but you're not actually specifying the type of tasks or the category of tasks. You're just saying, hey, this is going to be deep work, or this is going to be housework. And then finally, we use it for protected blocks of time, where this is going to be my personal time. And so no one else can schedule it. So that's usually done more in a schedule, but you can also do that in the type of time blocking that we're going to talk today, where you say, hey, I'm going to schedule an hour of personal time. I'm not going to say what I'm going to do in there, but I'm going to just take a break in the middle of my day to kind of just do my own thing. So how much time do we spend within a time block, right? There are 4 ways of looking at time blocks. First is that there's a fixed time block, and that's where we work for the entire allocated time, but no more. And this is what is most commonly known within the time blocking world, where we're saying, I'm going to work on something for 90 minutes. At the end of the 90 minutes, I'm going to switch to my next task. You can also have a threshold time block. This is useful when you are having distraction or procrastination, where you're resisting working on it. And this is saying, hey, I'm allowed to stop early as long as I spend a minimum amount of time. So I have to work on this for 15 minutes. Ideally, I'm going to work on it for an hour, but I can quit early if for some reason I'm just not getting into a flow state. This is good, for instance, when you need to do something creative, but it does require also kind of getting in the mood. Well, you don't want to just quit right away and just say I'm not going to get started because I'm not in the mood. But it could be that hey, I try it out for 15 minutes, a half an hour, and it's just not working. And so then I give up and I go to the next time block and I reschedule that time block later. So that's a good use of a threshold time block. The next one is extendable. That's kind of the flip side. This is when we're in the flow. And what we want to do is okay, we scheduled an hour and a half to work on this thing, but now we're in the flow and we want to kind of keep going. And this is where we allow the time block to extend to cover what needs to get done. And there's some strategies around how we arrange time blocks. For instance, I might want to put like an optional time block after an extendable one. So that way, if I extend my time block, I'm not running up against constraints in my schedule. The final type of time block is a constrained time block. It's also called a time box. This is where we say we have to complete the task within the allocated time. And what this allows us to do is reduce our scope to make sure that the task gets done, but respect the time block. So you'll often see this again when you're writing a blog article. I'm going to write this in an hour. I'm not going to give myself any more than that. And that allows me to make sure I get something done, but then move on from that. Another good example here is in research. Sometimes we can easily go down rabbit holes when we're doing research, where I need to research a new purchase I'm making, and suddenly I'm spending 3, 4, 5 hours going and researching that. I can have a constrained time block to say, I need to make a decision after an hour and a half or 2 hours, no more than 2 hours, and then I'm making my decision. And that helps me manage my time more effectively. So these are some examples of how it might look on a time block. I've got deep work for 2 hours, finished taxes an hour, marketing an hour. What I'm doing here is I'm giving it the name of the activity, like the task or activity I'm doing, and then I'm assigning an allocated amount of time to it. I'm going to spend it for 2 hours. The benefits of time blocks is that it creates containers for us to work on specific facets of our life or work. Often what we do is if we're not using time blocking, we work on what is most pressing, and we often forget the important things in our life and work. And so by saying, hey, I need to spend an hour each day working on marketing, or I want to make sure I take out time in my day to exercise, or whatever that is, this creates these containers to make sure that we're actually creating the balance in our life that we're looking for. It also grants psychological freedom, because if I know that I've got a time block scheduled later in the day or allocated later in the day, I can not think about it for right now. So I can just kind of put it outside and not have it interfere with my thinking process. When we have too much stuff on our list, sometimes even though we're trying to do the task at hand, we're constantly thinking about all the future things that we need to do. By actually defining these blocks, oh, I've got this in the future for an hour or two, that makes it easier. This allows us to then balance competing priorities by allocating time to each of the different time blocks. I can say, I'm going to work 3 hours on client work today. I'm going to do an hour on marketing. I'm going to do an hour on admin work, et cetera, and make sure that I'm moving all my balls forward on all my active projects. And then, as we talked about before, it creates a dedicated time to focus to make progress on these important tasks. So what is a time bucket then? A time bucket is a list of commitments, each with a time allocation, sort of in execution order from top to bottom. It's a bit of a wordy thing, so let's actually dive in and look at what that actually means. Here's 2 examples of time buckets, one in Day Optimizer, one on paper. You can see the time blocks that we just defined earlier, like paying taxes, marketing, et cetera, are actually here, but they're now stacked on top of one each other. So there's pay taxes at first, marketing a second, send proposal, work client session 1. So each of these is a time block. And what we've done is we've stacked those time blocks into a time bucket. And what this time bucket then lets us do is, first off, it gives us an execution order. We know we need to pay taxes before we work on our marketing. The second thing it does, it gives us a constrained amount of time. So I can say my time bucket is only going to be 8 hours long. And so if I fill up too many things in my time bucket, then what's going to happen is that I'm not going to get to those. And that can be okay if I'm working in a time bucket, because the things that, if I've sorted them in the priority order from top to bottom, what's going to happen is the things at the bottom I just won't get to that day. So here on the left-hand side is the time bucket in Day Optimizer. In Day Optimizer, you can drag and drop these to reorder them. You can check them off, mark them off as either done today, skip today, or won't do. When you do that, they drop to the bottom to push the next one up. And so you'll always have the next item at the top of the list. These also update to tell you what the current committed effort is, what the projected end of your day, etc. This is the paper version. And the paper version, basically, you still write it, and then you draw a big, huge line across when the time block ends. So you can see here, pay taxes is going to take up 2 15-minute blocks. They're half an hour. Marketing is 4 15-minute blocks for an hour. Send proposal, 30 minutes, half an hour, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of work down our way here. How we use it on paper to kind of make sure we know where we're at throughout our day is we check something off or cross it off when we're done with it. And then we make 2 X marks. You can see here I've done 2 X marks for paying taxes. Now I can immediately kind of go over here and see, oh, I've got 7 hours and 30 minutes left in my day. Now, say I do this out of order, because on the optimizer, I can drag and drop, but you can't drag and drop on paper. So if I do the proposal next, what I would do is I would do 2 more X marks for these 2, because the proposal is 2 15-minute blocks. And now how much time do I have in my day? I just come over here and I look, 7 hours left in my day. So I can always know exactly how much time I have left in my day and see how much time I've allocated to everything. And this gives us a visual representation of the amount of time I've allocated to all that. So again, time buckets, they help us make good trade-off decisions because we only have a limited amount of time in our day. So if we try to do everything, we won't be able to accomplish that. And having that constraint, having that saying, you only have 8 hours to fit into this bucket. So what are you not going to fit into that bucket? And have a visualization that shows you that you can't put those things in the bucket will force you to say, okay, I'm going to do X versus Y. I'm going to pay my taxes. I'm not going to read Facebook, or I'm not going to just process my email because paying my taxes is more important. It also removes the master task list as a distraction. So one of the things that happens throughout the day when we have a master task list is we look at it and then we wind up choosing a lower priority list to work on because it's easier. Or we think, hey, I forgot about that. I need to do that right away. By creating this time bucket, we're focusing on only the things that we should focus on today. So this allows us to make sure that we're making progress in our higher priorities. So we put our higher priorities at the top of the bucket, therefore we get them done earlier in the day before the rest of the day. And then the second thing we do is it's shifting us from an accomplishment mindset to a progress mindset. And I know we all want to accomplish stuff, but the irony there is if you focus on making progress on your key priorities regularly, you will accomplish them way faster than if you focus on just the pure accomplishment. Because if you're just trying to check things off your list, what tends to happen is you then don't get them all done. You'll get overwhelmed, and then that will make you work less effectively. Whereas if you have this mindset, hey, I'm going to work an hour each day on marketing and keep moving that ball forward, I'm going to just keep working on all my priorities and make progress on them, it lets you get them done faster. And that is the end of the quick presentation on time blocking without a schedule. Next time we'll go into, or one of the future sessions, a little bit more into the deeper aspects of time blocking, how to construct a time block, and then also building schedules and all that. Are there any questions?